As I teach for the fundraising school, a topic comes up often, and there seems to be more talk than action. And what I'm referring to is when nonprofits collaborate, let alone when there are mergers. And there are always recommendations. There should be a collaboration there. There should be a merger there. Well, it's a lot easier said than done. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz. This is the first day from the fundraising school, and I'm joined today by Phil Purcell. Phil is a veteran faculty member of the fundraising school, and that just scratches the surface of his expertise on teaching fundraising, teaching planned gift fundraising, and especially having deep knowledge of the legal issues associated with the nonprofit sector. And Phil, thanks so much for being back with us on the Fundraising School's First Day podcast.
Thank you, Bill. I'm honored to be here with you, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
And you have been named to a couple of different committees with the American Bar Association, and the titles are longer than my last name times infinity. So I'm just wondering for our audience, can you just let them know these prestigious positions you're in, helping guide legal issues for our sector?
Well, that's very nice of you to mention that. It's obviously a volunteer activity and has been a long time volunteer activity of mine. Of course, I'm a licensed lawyer in Indiana, but a member of the American Bar Association as well, which is obviously the trade association of attorneys nationwide. And they have a number of volunteer groups and committees that people can just hold up their hand and volunteer for. And I did that years ago, and well, you do anything long enough and, suddenly you're asked to do more and more if you show up and volunteer and work hard. So now I've been asked to be the chairman, which is the top position of their charitable giving and organizations group. It's a group that's not part of the tax section of the American Bar Association, which is an important distinction in the ABA hierarchy, but we get into tax issues, we get into organizational issues, and state law issues, federal law issues that relate to either charitable organizations and or charitable giving. So we have a very robust and active membership. Most of the membership are practicing attorneys who either specialize in estate planning or creation and counsel to tax-exempt nonprofit organizations. So it's been just a wonderful opportunity for me. I've met a lot of amazing people across the country who really work hard to serve the charitable nonprofit sector. And we schedule, great speakers. And we've had the Lilly School of Philanthropy and the Fundraising School featured several times with different speakers, most recently the dean and a student working on doctorates. So they've gotten a dose of the Lilly School courtesy of my invitation. And
we appreciate that so much, Phil, and all that you're doing for our sector to make it stronger, help us be aware of these legal issues. And again, as I mentioned in the open, one of these topics is, why don't nonprofits collaborate more, let alone merge more? It kind of happens naturally and organically in the private sector. Your colleagues in the legal profession, there are entire divisions, M&A, mergers and acquisitions, and that's all they do because it's such a frequent occurrence in the private sector, but not so much in the nonprofit sector. So a lot of talk, not always a lot of action. In your observation, as you've worked on these, let's kind of take it from the beginning. What needs to be true about a nonprofit where they say, yes, we want to collaborate, or even go the next step and merge with another nonprofit?
Right. It is, as you said, I agree with you 100% that it's a difficult subject in the nonprofit sector, and it can be driven by a number of considerations. One would be economic. We had, as you well know, during COVID, a lot of challenging economic times for nonprofits. And so the idea of partnering, if not a merger, some sort of strategic partnership, because the bottom line is so severely challenged. And maybe that the nonprofit that's struggling financially has a program or a group of programs or services that, let's say, fit well with another nonprofit that's bigger, more robust, and stable. So the idea of some sort of partnering is often considered then. Another avenue for partnership are grassroots organizations. They're new, they're fledgling, but they don't have a fundraising base. And as you well know, Bill, donor acquisition, that is more difficult than new organizations realize when they go into it. And so partnering with another entity in some, let's say, formal legal kind of structure, be it either a fiscal sponsorship or a supporting organization or as a program of the nonprofit. And then maybe down the road, maybe they graduate, become a separate entity. So fledgling grassroots startups, that's another venue of partnership. You have also maybe at the front end, you've got maybe two disparate kinds of entities, but they see some real strategy. They're doing completely different things, but maybe see some strategy in working together to tackle a really diverse problem. We see a lot of partnerships, of course, with 501c3s and 501c4s. So the C4s can do a lot of lobbying, they can do some political campaign activity, but the C3s can't. They can do a little bit of lobbying, but not much. So you see a lot of partnerships sometimes in that direction as well. So, yeah, a lot of different varied circumstances for partnering and or merging in one of various different ways.
So a lot of what you were saying there has something in common. That's funding. Somebody is maybe struggling financially or is getting started and needs to increase their fundraising. There could be public policy issues that could lead this. Hopefully there are mission maximization opportunities, right? That there are strong organizations that are collaborating and coming together. How did these steps happen? And, Phil, in human nature, it might be easy to think this is not staff driven. It's probably board driven because the staff might be thinking, mergers means, redundancy. Redundancy means layoffs, and I'm going to lose my job if we merge or if we collaborate.
Yeah.
Is this more often than not driven by the board of directors, or is that not the case?
Well, I think you would find examples of both, but I think you're absolutely right that staff, especially staff who are insecure, or if it's an economically challenged charity, might feel threatened by that. So yes, and maybe not even board, but other volunteers, thought leaders, donors, significant donors, as you well know, will step in and offer counsel that, hey, I think we need some assistance this way or that way. And significant donors, as we all know, have great influence sometimes on the directions we go. So there are a lot of different angles. At the end of the day, you're absolutely correct. And it boils down, as we always know, to the board of directors deciding, is this something that makes sense for us or not? And but it's as like a lot of things in the nonprofit space, it's the rational piece of figuring out how it's done is sometimes maybe a little easier than the emotional piece of should we do it? Do the cultures match? Is this something that we can reasonably think will make sense once it's put together? Because you would like to hope that the sum of the parts is a greater whole, but maybe not. Maybe that you get into it and you realize, ooh, this isn't going to work. So that preparation is hugely important. So before the actual final decision to come together, that reviewing is very, very important. I'll never forget early in my career, I worked for a very large hospital foundation that merged with another very large hospital chain. So two large hospitals merged. And I'm just a plan giving guy in the foundation office. But oh my goodness, the amount of time spent on crafting the mission statement, the charism. I felt like as much time, this wasn't probably true, but my reflection at the time was we've spent as much time trying to craft the mission statement, the charism, the principles, as they spent lining up the financial statements. So that matching is hugely important. It's very much an emotional, but more than emotion, as you know, in mission, it's all about mission. It's matching up missions.
Phil, thank you for that wisdom. When we were talking about, who starts this, and you mentioned the donors might, I've been involved with one merger in my nonprofit career. I was on the boards of two different nonprofit organizations, and it was actually donors who came to me and they said, "You're on the board of both." "Yes, I am." We're basically giving the same gift to both organizations for the same reason, and they are in neighborhoods that are adjoining. Why are we doing this? Because in our world, in the private sector, they were telling me this would be a natural way to merge. And fortunately, both executive directors were open to that. Both boards of directors were open to that, but it was donor led. So that can happen as well. And the result has been a stronger organization with more efficiency. Some of the donors actually increased their gift to kind of reward the merger. So we've seen that happen in the past. And you mentioned the cultural issues. Yes, it can be the things that you mentioned in terms of mission, but how about just work style and what's it like to be in our office and what are our work policies? And, we've always sort of done it this way. It's kind of like, this is our family and this is the way we celebrate a holiday, right? And now
Yeah.
here's this other nonprofit and they have their list and there may be some differences. How do we work through those cultural issues when you've been involved legally? Does the lawyer play that role, or are there other intermediaries that can help bring those organizations together?
Yeah, that's a very good and astute point. And as we all know, even within organizations, there are changes over time as well, brought about by new board leadership, sometimes wanting to stir the pot and they don't feel like things are as efficient they ought to be, or new CEOs come in, et cetera, et cetera. So this challenge to the status quo is always a bit of on the table, and over time can make changes even if there's no merger or partnership. But you're right that the coming together, I think, before the legal and financial issues get worked out, you got to work out this alignment of mission statement and, as you said, the culture and how is this gonna fit together. So yes, there would be consultants available, for example, who have done work in this area, very fine experts who can come alongside. They wouldn't necessarily be the legal side or the financial side. They are literally the Svengalis of the cultural side. Let's do some auditing. Let's do some prioritization. Let's do some strategic thinking. Let's put together a potential organizational chart and kind of play with it a little bit and see if this is what's going to fit or not. It might involve some board members from both sides of, let's say, two different entities or other key people, but it is going to have to be, in my opinion, mediated by somebody who's an impartial, independent kind of expert in the area, or more than one who can kind of help and have confidential interviews with key donors. Kind of not that dissimilar from organizing a big fundraising campaign where you do the audit and the feasibility and all of that. You got to have somebody, and those fundraising firms who do those feasibilities and audits, they're very skillful at these conversations, and they kind of know where the problems might be, and they have enough interviews with key people or stakeholders to assess the scenario and then prepare a recommendation. And then, okay, if it looks like, yeah, we can move the next step, then you would bring in let's say the lawyer and the financial side to try to figure out, okay, how do these pieces really best come together based on a variety of factors on the legal or financial side.
So the opportunity has been identified. There's been a spark. Somebody or somebodies
Yeah.
have suggested this and moved this forward. We've worked through those mission issues, those cultural issues, and now it's time to look at the financials and it's time to look at the legal issues. And Phil, folks who are watching this podcast can see behind you all of those file folders and all of those books on your bookshelf. And in our time here, we don't have time for all of those details, sadly. So what are some of those headlines in terms of the financial and legal issues that I need to be thinking about if I'm merging with another or collaborating with another nonprofit organization?
Right. Well, I'll talk first about the legal. That's what I know most about. And then I only play an accountant on television, although we're kind of television here. So I'll talk about the legal. So a starting point would be if you're like me, a lawyer who's brought in to analyze how does this best fit together. I always start with, well, where are we at right now? I never make an assumption about anything, and I'm not kidding. And I am, and this won't surprise you, Bill, because you've been in this space a long time. I'm often amazed at what organizations don't understand or realize about their legal format. And maybe they're using a DBA name they didn't even know that was not their true legal name. They may be They may have some quirky things in their bylaws or articles they didn't know existed. And so when you're doing a deep dive about creating either a partnership or a merger or whatever the range might be, you've got to really have a deep understanding of, well, where legally are you right now? So you look at if you're a nonprofit corporation, your articles of incorporation and bylaws, and if you're a C3 or C4 or whatever you are, clarifying, well, what are you? Are you part of a group exemption letter? I don't know. I mean, you just never know. And so that's on the federal side. So you've got to have real clarity on the legal standing and structure of the entity on the federal and state side. All right. So then maybe, how you move forward depends on that. So, for example, while most nonprofits and most of us kind of assume nonprofits are nonprofit corporations, uh, some can be charitable trusts, for example. And I just helped a community foundation transition from a trust to a nonprofit corporation, and which made sense for them. But once again, that's a whole different kind of animal in terms of trying to discern how it ought to reorganize. So there may be some needs for cleanup of the existing organizations and straightening up. So in this merger, then that has to be done. Under most state laws, when you talk about nonprofit corporations, each state has, its version, and there's a lot of uniformity across the country, but we are the United States of America, where I don't think any two state legislatures, they can hardly agree on anything. So there can be nuances in these state laws, but generally what's going to happen if it's a merger, you're going to file articles of merger, but before that, you've got to have a plan for merger. So it's usually required to be embedded in the new articles of merger what the plan is in terms of the new mission, purpose. Purpose statements very important in the charitable sector, and that sort of thing. So under most state laws, there's this articles of merger. Now that's separate from articles of incorporation. This is a document saying these two other entities are going to merge. Now you might have, different organizations in different states. All right, so now you've got to decide, well, where are we going to do this merger and where's it going to end up? Maybe we don't want it to end up in a certain state. Maybe we want it to end up in another state. So there's that whole set of considerations around strategy. And there are differences and preferences sometimes around what states or state you'd want this to end up in. So articles of merger, plan of merger, tinkering with the articles of, is one going to dissolve and actually subsume in the other, or what's going to happen there? And now, look, we didn't really talk much about this, but short of a merger, there are these other venues of partnering called fiscal sponsorships. And there are different types of fiscal sponsorships, but generally that's an arrangement where this parent organization, the sponsor, is kind of offering up its services, its gift receipt writing services, its investment services, and in a sense, its branding and credibility for fledgling or struggling entities who may not even be organized yet. So, well, again, I have a 16-page kitchen sink fiscal sponsorship agreement document to kind of lay out all the who's responsible for what things, because even in fledgling enterprises, you've got issues to worry about and potential liabilities to protect from. That's a fiscal sponsorship. And then again, that fiscal sponsorship usually, from my perspective, is time limited, but could evolve into either becoming a program of a charity or setting up its own separate entity. Who knows? Then there's the supporting org structure where you maybe have, I've seen this a fair amount in the community foundation space, where you've got these two community foundations, but one is kind of the big gorilla in the geography and a smaller kind of satellite, and they realize there's economies of scale to be had here if we do a little more partnering. And so one model, there are other models, but one would be a supporting org where the smaller entity becomes a supporting organization of the parent, let's say, the larger support ed organization. You have to give up a little legal control, but at the end of the day, if you play well in the sandbox, everybody can come out ahead. But again, you've got to have that cultural, understanding. Is this going to work? And usually the supporting organization board of directors, they want to feel like they still got skin in the game. They want to feel like they still have a say. And that's always in a lot of these kinds of instances where a lot of the rubber meets the road is, are the people who were the leaders of the former organization going to have to give up all their space? Are they going to have to like check out and a whole nother group of people take over? So sometimes this creation of a leadership structure and hierarchy is a very important part of the whatever choice you make, and how that leadership gets merged in together, and how donors feel like they're satisfied. And well, and as you might well know, Bill, you always worry about when these kind of mergers or partnerships is who's monitoring donor intent. And if we have restricted gifts from 100 years ago, are we giving up any of those wishes of donors? And if we're going to do that, well, okay, what laws do we have to follow to amend or modify donor intent if we have to? And that's a whole nother set of considerations. So for a guy like me, these kinds of instances can be quite fascinating to get in the middle of, to figure out how to, because there's going to have to be some compromise usually somewhere, or multiple spots.
Phil, you just get too excited talking about these things. What a joy, not just the substance, but also the passion. And folks, this is why Phil is in such great demand nationally and around the world, teaching planned giving, teaching and consulting on the legal issues associated with nonprofit organizations overall, including with mergers, collaborations, partnerships. Phil, thank you so much for being back with us on the Fundraising Schools podcast.
I'm honored. Thank you very much, Bill.
And again, there's a lot there with identification, mission issues, cultural issues, and legal issues. But folks, at the end of the day, it's worth it if it maximizes our mission. And of course, mission and cause and the results, the way we're making the world a better place, is why people donate to our nonprofit organizations and why foundations and corporations support us financially as well. That's what Phil and I and the rest of us teach at the Fundraising School through 27 courses leading to 5 different certificates. We're in about a dozen U.S. cities now, and of course, online anywhere across the world. We have our custom training. We'll design content just for your nonprofit organization, bring it right to you, or your association, maybe your collaboration of nonprofits. We can do that as well. We have quarterly webinars, these weekly podcasts, our knowledge gathered in our textbook, Achieving Excellence in Fundraising. And all this information is available online at go.iu.edu/TFRS for the Fundraising School. I'm grateful for our producers today, Mike Anthony and Jennifer Boffman. I'm Bill Stanczykiewicz, and now you are more fully informed on this first day from the Fundraising School.